Light and shadow is really designed to contribute a realistic scene in video game. Most of games set up light and shadow as part of visual design but not be an interactable mechanic. In this research, I explored the possible method to implement collision for shadow and use it as a core mechanic for player to interact in video game. The existing research on tracking shape of shadow has been processed through graphics and physics engine development, which requires very deep understanding in these fields. Independent developers often not good at graphics-related development or do not have strong ability to modify game engine. This practice trying to figure out a possible method which based on Unity engine and custom scripts to track shape of shadow and develop further to make shadow interactable. Video game In My Shadow is a puzzle platformer which player can play with collidable shadow to solve logical puzzles. But In My Shadow has gaps with its shadow collision. The light source which generates shadow is stable in the scene. It limits the angle of shadow generation and reduces possibility of shape changes on shadow. Another gap that becomes a border for designer is the division of interactive area. The gameplay design that all the interactions on player character is only happen with shadow. To take a deeper look at game In My Shadow, the core mechanic that implement collision on shadow is incomplete. Echogam 2 is a 3D puzzle game designed by Sony Japan Studio. The player character is moving on shadow, and most of puzzle is designed for player to utilize variable shape of shadow and create accessible area, which requires player to change shape of shadow by moving light source as its core mechanic. Echogam 2 is probably the best video game that's designed for player to interact with dynamic shape of shadow, but it still has the same gap as In My Shadow. To fix the gap and develop my own gameplay, I use raycasting for tracking. Raycasting is one of the most popular series that used to handle shadow tracking in video game, especially for 2D games. The basic idea is casting rays from light source to all the vertices of polygons to find where they intersect barriers. Raycasting shadow can achieve the tracking needs, and it could be implemented through existing game engine tools and scripts. So I have explored the methods to track shape of shadow based on raycasting. Once the shape of shadow has been tracked, it is possible to generate collider based on the shape dynamically. The idea is to assign preset planes with collider along the rays in shadow areas. The planes should have a tiny thinning to make it collidable and regenerate dynamically to match with rays generation. The shape of shadow is tracked by raycasting, which makes dynamic tracking possible. But the quality of casting is depending on number of rays, which challenges performance a lot when we are seeking an accurate result by generating rays to cast obstacles. During the progress of colliders generation, most of performance is caused on rays generation and colliders generation. It is necessary for us to improve efficiency for these two steps to make sure the method can run influence on the real-time gameplay. There are many rays be wasted since they are not hit on any target, but still be generated to shoot. My idea to improve performance is to detect useful and useless rays before generating colliders, and skip these who are useless when process generation. By cutting these useless rays, we are improving utilization rate of rays generation and real-life pressure of performance a lot. To conclude, Shadow adds realism to gameplay by adding visual information and shape of game object, but it can be exploited more to become interactable mechanics for player. A method for generating collision on shadow has been implemented by this research. Raycasting has been used as a core technology to track shape of shadow and generate collider dynamically. The outcome of this research is a tool that generates collision on shadow and could be used to develop interactions for player based on it. It is mainly provided for independent game developer, and all the technologies which required to develop this method are existing in current game engine. Thanks for watching.